Hi, everyone. So today we continue module number 4. Last week we were talking about the basically the basics of RAG with Llama Index, and um, I'll start sharing my screen. Give me a sec. I've been doing this a while, but I'm still looking for the button. Uh, that's the one. Okay. Right. And then I'll move it here. Okay. I left with a few slides, and if you remember, the most important slide, I repeat it again, is basically that chart there, which Engramar kindly added to our Discord channel also. Does anyone want to talk through the chart, or if maybe some volunteer to walk through? Someone, don't be shy. Someone has to volunteer, right? I don't want to be talking by myself. Engramar, I volunteer you. This is your review, right?
Unfortunately, I have to catch up. I think what happened to me is that, the PG vector, I'm experiencing some issues there with regards to, I guess, the installation side of things. But anyway, what I did is you mentioned about Chroma DB. So there's like an out of the box, step by step, I guess, procedure or process or instruction on how to enable it. So I just follow the instruction. I just run it locally, and I managed to ingest a PDF into it. There's something like you can also control the chunks or something like that. There's like a parameter there to control it, and it's able to respond. I managed to ingest the MD, which is the markdown, and also a PDF. But what I want to understand there is that based on this flow, that Chroma DB, I assume, is just the actual database itself, not really the LLM1 here. What happened? What do you think happened there? Because I can still get the responses.
Yeah. So what you did in that exercise was actually module number 3, right? Module number 3 was basically setting up your vector database. We actually have, we did mention before, right? Like we have a lot of options with vector databases, right? Just so happened that we chose, I chose PG Vector with Postgres, right? Because I thought that was, I guess, easiest for everyone, as we can actually see concrete, if you want to have a look at the database rows and columns if you wanted to. However, now looking back, PG Vector on Docker was actually not the easiest way. Chroma DB is actually quite easy, right? Like the way you use Chroma on your when you set up your retriever was running Chroma in memory, right? So basically, what you did there is this box here. Instead of in the exercises in the module 3, we said set it up in PG Vector. What you did was not set up PG Vector, but set that up using Chroma DB in memory, right? So you said when you did the exercise, you felt that you didn't have the LLM one.
Correct. But it's responding. But it is responding accordingly.
Yes. Because the thing is, right, you actually don't have this part yet, right? You don't have the, we don't have the, you basically created Llama index retriever that sends we basically ingest the data in your Chroma DB, right? And then when we set up the retriever, we only use the embedding model to get the similar items from it, right? We haven't done this green part yet. That's the green part. That's in module 4, right? When we do a query query engine. Query engine is basically the RAG in Llama Index language, right? So yeah, we basically just did the indexing and the retrieval, with that setup. In module 4, that's when we involved the LLM. So when you said you sent questions or queries to ChromaDB and it responded to you,
Yep.
it responded with a similar, list of similar text segments. That was the response.
It's like a text search, essentially, what they're responding. It's not
We're actually doing a similarity search, right? So if you would have, I remember we have a parameter called top K, right? We can set top K to be 4, 5, 6, right? And that makes the vector DB respond with how many similar segments, right? If you would have changed that to maybe 5, you would have seen 5 responses, 5 items returned from a DB.
That's what I noticed. Yeah, actually, there's like a score as well. That the highest.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's arranged in kind of like a score. The one at the top is the highest, and then the one at the bottom is the least similar.
I see. That explains it. Then
that was the list of similar text segments.
There's really no LLM.
Not yet. So that's actually the context we need to pass, right? We need to pass to the LLM in module 4.
I see.
Yeah.
And another question there is that, let's say, for example, I use ChromaDB, right? What's the benefit of? I was just thinking that maybe there's really no need for us to really see whatever is embedded in the database or the vector database.
Yeah.
So I guess using ChromaDB has got some level of transparency that it's like a black box.
Yeah.
Yes, whatever. I was wondering what's the benefit of seeing those chunks in the database itself.
I'm very visual, right? Like I need to see things to kind of understand it. Maybe I thought, if I'm like that, then many people are like that too. So, but yeah, I mean, you could actually use whatever vector database that you like.
I see, but you're not actually doing like an actual tweaking of each row, each vector rows. When you're using a PG vector, it's really more of like just understanding or
yeah, that's right. Yeah. PG vector, the advantage also is when we're building applications, yes, it can be our store for vector embeddings, but because we have our vector DB there, PG vector, our application can use a database also, right? So if we have an application, a complete application that uses the vector DB using, with the RAG functionality, we also, because PG vector is already there, we still can use it for other things, right? Including the vector DB functionality. So that's kind of advantage of it, because it's a database. You can use it like any other database, right? Any other questions or no feedback about was setting up PG vector or Postgres hard for you, or did you do anything like what Engramar did and set up ChromaDB instead? Okay, maybe let's just start looking at the notebook, shall we? Yeah. Today is basically just a continuation of the last week. Last week we had, quite intimate about this chart that you see here. We do have a companion notebook for it. So it's quite kind of short notebook, and I'm hoping that you already had a look at it before. While during the week, wink wink, did your assignments. Okay, so let's see. Right. How's that? Is that the size? Is that okay? Good. Okay. Thanks.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is just a review. Please let me know if you have any questions. It's more effective, I guess, when you ask the questions when you actually remember it. It's kind of hard to ask questions maybe later on in Discord, but please interrupt me anytime. But yeah, this is a short notebook just to go through the that chart, that slide that we saw earlier. We all know what that is now. Just installing your dependencies. The first thing we need to do is set up our retriever model, right? So in a simple RAG system, we're now experts about it. There's LLM1 and LLM2. LLM1 is our retriever, which is basically our embedding model. And in this particular scenario, we used a Hugging Face embedding model. So just a review, Hugging Face embedding model. It is a language model, but it's quite small that we can actually afford to run it locally, right? So that's what we're doing now. We downloading it from Hugging Face, and there's no server running, right? Like I have it's actually running in my memory. So once you get the embedding model, through Hugging Face, there's a functionality for getting the text embedding. So we are getting the embedding model. This particular embedding model has 768 dimensions. We already know what dimensions mean. Okay, so yeah, we've got LLM1 or the retriever ready. We can proceed and set up our LLM, right? And this is so familiar to you already, right? Like we're using the Llama index functionality with the LM Studio extension. So we're saying, hey, I want you to load Llama 3 8B quantized model, and I have it running in LM Studio on my local machine in port 1234. So we've seen that.
Looks like you had a question.
Rinesh, yep. What was that? Can we? I wasn't quick enough to read the question.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead, Renish.
Hi. So my question was, so in the above code snippet that you just showed, so you access the Hugging Face embedded model without downloading it to the local, right? So I assume it is directly accessing like their hub. Do we have option to access the OpenAI models as well, similar to Hugging Face embedding model?
Yes. In fact, Llama Index, the default embedding model is OpenAI, right? So if you don't specify, it's gonna look for the ADA. I don't remember one of the main embedding model in OpenAI, and it's gonna ask for. Yeah, you can give it a try, right? Let's give it a try. Maybe not. I don't wanna have to go. But yeah, if you don't specify, you can specify. Let me go back here. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm talking about, but I know for a fact, Rinesh, that if you don't specify an embedding model, Llama Index will actually look for your OpenAI embedding model, the default one.
Okay.
And if you haven't specified anything, it will ask you basically what's your you have your OpenAI key, API key is missing, right? Because by default, if you don't specify anything, it will actually load the default OpenAI embedding model.
Okay, great. I read it fine. Yeah.
Quick question, Jo.
Yes, please. Yeah.
I'm very sorry. Can you scroll up again?
Oh, yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah, because I'm just going back to your drawing, right? The diagram. Well, I just want to understand this one here, setting the embedding model, and if you scroll down a bit,
Yeah.
that's setting the LLM. So you can see that there are a couple of things there. The first one is the Hugging Face embedding model, and then the second one is the LLM. In relation to the diagram, are those the LLM1 and LLM? I'm just curious, what's the difference between the two again, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Thanks.
So going back to this slide again, we have two LLMs, right? LLM1 and LLM2. This one is the embedding model, which is the face model. This one is our main LLM, which is the one we deployed in LM Studio.
And can we, is it somewhat like equivocal? I'm just saying, just not to confuse myself, LLM and embedding model, like it can be used interchangeably, something like that. Is it sort of like, because the first, in your instruction, right? The first one setting up the embedding model, the second one setting up the LLM. Can we just standardize it saying,
Yeah, I think maybe it's kind of confusing. Now looking back, I kind of was confused before. I thought that we only had one LLM, but to make it maybe simpler and not confusing, maybe from now on we can call this the retriever model. Retriever being we retrieve the embeddings and use the embeddings to retrieve the vector database, and we can call this the generator model, right? So that's kind of how Llama Index calls, LLM1 and LLM2. I did steal this chart from AWS in one of our training sessions early this year, and they, their convention is, calling it LLM1 and LLM2. So because it's not my chart, I just just show it to you.
so best practice, Jo, are you saying that, for a retrieval or LLM, the LLM1, wherein we use a Hugging Face in-memory model, is it typically in memory, or can we have both LLM1, LLM2 Hugging Face models, or do you recommend LLM2 to be, in our setup to be the one running in LM Studio or something?
Yeah, they're very different actually. LLM1, the embedding model, its input is text in this case, right? And its output is a list or an array of vectors.
Vectors, yeah.
Right? That's the retriever model, LLM1, right? The generator model, on the other hand, doesn't understand embedding vectors at all, right? All it understands is text in and natural language in and natural language out, right? See this green bit? Its input is context, which is natural language. Question is a natural language. The prompt is a natural language. It doesn't understand embedding vectors, right?
I see.
Whereas this one, you enter text and it outputs a vector.
So it's really like a converting type of.
Because you've got a couple of options, right? In using your embedding model or the retriever, because they're quite tiny. They're essentially functions, right? They convert text to an array, right? It's basically a function. So you'll see in Hugging Face, these models are like not even 500K. They're tiny, right? They download really quickly, and because they're tiny, we can actually just host it locally. That's what we're doing here in a small application like this, right? There's only one user. There's no need for deploying your embedding model in something like a SageMaker, right? On the cloud. You can do that if you want to, but there's no need to.
And it's also possible that you can have two, I guess, LLMs running within the LM Studio. Let's say, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then that's actually what I did. If you remember LM Studio, I have. Sorry. I have, the main LLM running, and I also have the, embedding model. It's quite confusing, honestly, the user interface, but yeah, you can load both the retriever model and the generator model in LM Studio. Yes.
But the best practice, can you safely say that the retrieval model will can be like just a in-memory Hugging
Yeah,
Face?
I think so. It's small, right? If you've got memory and if your machine doesn't complain, then yeah, just go for it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so much time we got? 10 minutes, very quick. So now we have set up our LLM and then set a variable aside for that for later. Now here we're basically setting up our Postgres, right? It's kind of confusing now because there's lots of things that code we're doing to set up Postgres. What Engramar did was, instead of Postgres, because I guess there was some issues with it with the installation version incompatibility. He basically tried with Chroma, which you can do quite easily. And was it quick setting up Chroma, Engramar?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. That's probably easier hindsight, looking back. So instead of Postgres, now just replace that with
So,
Chroma.
Geo, there's a caveat there. It's easy to do the actual, conversion to or ingestion to the database, but I haven't really done this yet. As
Uh-huh, uh-huh. I've used Chroma, and yeah, it's also kind of easier. But at that time, I didn't actually know what I'm doing until I used Postgres, until I actually saw how it is, how the vectors are actually persisted in the database. That's kind of you know penny dropped, right? Basically, I that's when I understood it back to front. Okay, going back up. Okay, so yeah, we're setting up PG Vector here. What we're doing is every time we run it, we're basically just dropping the database and creating it. In reality, when we are in production, we don't really drop and create every time, but for the purpose of this exercise, that's what we're doing. And did you actually read this PDF? It's really good. It's quite timely with the topic that we're discussing, and it's basically saying, what are the main failure points in a RAG system, and there's 7 failure points. So have a look at that, when in your downtime. And yeah, wget, that's basically how we download it to a local machine, and actually downloaded it to the data folder, right? So that's where it is if you want to have a look at it also. You don't really need to download every time, but that's if you need to, maybe later on in the projects, if you need to download PDFs or text files, that's how you do it from the notebook. And then there's a couple of functions here for data ingestion, actually 2 functions. It's really just the one. And we are running the ingestion in here. Okay, so just quickly, what simple rag what does simple rag function do? It's basically the setting up the rag for llama index, right? So what are the important things here to know? Is the vector store index. Basically the index, that's kind of how the index is created from the PG vector, right? PG vector, we've got connection string details here. So from the connection string we are created at the top. And then you basically just return that index, right? The moment you okay, simple rag, where is this actually called? Ingest documents, right? And the moment you say load data, ingest documents function, the moment you say, see, line number 50 is basically our simple directory reader, which is an object in Llama index where you basically pass, basic functionality is you pass the input directory, and all the text files in there gets ingested when we actually do the load data and when you call. And this is basically just instantiating or basically defining the functions, but we're actually calling it in here. And when we do that, it goes through the files, loads it to the vector database, in this case Postgres, but in Engrammar's case it's Chroma. And that's actually we've built our RAG system, right? Llama Index makes it very easy. Llama Index has a abstraction called query engine, right? So once you have an index from your vector store, right? Once you got that index, you can actually wrap that as a query engine. And in Llama Index speak, query engine is basically a RAG system, right? So if you remember our chart, right? Our chart was quite elaborate, right? So we're indexing, we're when we send a question, the retriever model is basically generating an embedding, and then it does all that. Now Llama Index does all orchestration, right? So all you really need to do, right, if you notice, is basically just pass the question, right? We pass the question to the query engine and then just call query, right? And it does all these things here, the arrows, we send a question, right? And then we get the answer. Llama Index does all these things, even passing the, getting the list of similar text segments, passing the context, passing the question, passing the prompt, right, until we get the answer back. And in our function, we just pass the query and then we receive the answer straight away. Such a simple thing, but it's actually doing a lot of things under the cover.
Can I quickly ask one last question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So go back to that diagram, right? I think, remember I mentioned that I installed the Chroma DB. So I think that first line there up there, text chunks, I noticed that it's actually converting it already to vectors, the PDF into vectors inside Chroma DB. I think it shows there in the sysout. But I just want to double check again, the LLM1, the actual embedding that is it sort of like, because we know that it's converting it already to vectors, what additional knowledge it is trying to add in that retrieval process? Sorry if I want to.
That's cool. When we ingest, right, we basically pass the text
to the as a vector,
right? No. So see how we've got two arrows here to the vector DB, right? For one text chunk, what we do is we go to LLM1, get the vector. Now both the text chunk, see the text chunk is passed 2 times. Once Chroma DB and one straight to the LLM, right? Once we get the vector back, we're passing both the text chunk and the vector of
exactly the same text chunk.
Yeah, same text chunk, but this is the text, but this is a vector. The list of numbers.
Because when I saw the sysout from Chroma DB during ingestion, I can see vectors already there being generated. So that's why I got confused on whether does it have its own like embedding inside ChromaDB? How come it's
Yeah,
trying?
it's a database, just like Postgres, right? In Postgres, this is kind of how it looks like in Postgres.
Mhm.
Because we're passing text chunks and the vector inside the database, where we've got however many rows, right? How many chunks? Each row has a chunk, which is the text, and its equivalent vector. And it's exactly the same with with Chroma. Internally, it would store it like that too, right? Because when we pass our question vector here, what we want to do is get a list of text, the natural language similar segments. We're not After doing the vector search, this system doesn't need the vector embedding anymore, right? See the green part, the context, the similar segments, those are natural language. And because remember, LLM2, the generator doesn't understand embedding vectors at all.
Or, okay, Jo, I think I really need to also get back to it. Sorry for all my questions.
That's cool. I mean, that's basically what this session is for, right? Like, I know it's only 30 minutes. It's basically forcing us to just use the time wisely. About next week, I'll be away. So I talked to Angramar if we could maybe skip 1 week, if that's okay. Um, upon my return, maybe we can continue. If you're still game, to go next. Next part is the going through a little bit more advanced, not that advanced, but a little bit more advanced. Would that work?
Yeah, it's good for actually personally. That would be good. Catch up.
Yeah. So yeah, see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again for we've done this already. How many 5 weeks now? Maybe 6 weeks. I'm still amazed. People still show up. So thanks so much for the support.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you everyone. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye. Bye bye.